Jimmy Fallon leaned in with one last question. And that's when Donald Trump pushed back his chair, stood up, and walked straight off the stage. You won't believe what sparked this explosive exit and the shocking moment that happened off camera. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The crowd inside NBC studio had been buzzing with excitement all night. Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show was always a mix of laughs, lighthearted games, and celebrity charm. The kind of place where political tension usually stayed outside the studio doors. But that night, the air felt different. It wasn't just excitement. It was curiosity, unease. Donald Trump, former president, billionaire businessman, and TV personality, had agreed to appear for what was billed as a combination of serious talk and comedic fun. Fallon, ever the entertainer, had promised viewers a lively conversation. Everyone expected banter. What they didn't expect was the undercurrent that would build into something no one in the room could ignore. The opening banter. When Trump walked out, the cheers were loud but mixed, an unmistakable blend of applause and a few hesitant claps. He waved, smiled, and gave that trademark nod to the audience as he took his seat on the gray armchair. Fallon leaned forward with his signature grin. "So, Donald," Fallon began, "how's the golf game? Still better than mine?" The audience chuckled. Trump smirked and fired back without missing a beat. "Jimmy, I've seen your swing. Let's just say you'd be better off hosting miniature golf." The laughter came easily at first. Fallon joked about Trump's hair, Trump teased Fallon about his ratings, and for a moment it felt like just another Tonight Show interview. Safe, rehearsed, predictable. But under those smiles, something else flickered. Trump's eyes had that sharp, watchful glint. Fallon's jokes, while light, had edges. The air between them wasn't hostile, but it wasn't entirely friendly either. The shift. It happened about 10 minutes in. Fallon, easing into more serious territory, asked, "You've been out of office for a while now. Do you miss it? The pressure, the attention?" Trump leaned back, crossed his legs, and paused just long enough to make the audience lean forward. "I miss the winning, Jimmy. The country was winning. People were happy. We didn't have the disasters we see now. And you know it." The room's energy shifted. The laughter didn't follow that answer. Fallon tried to keep it light. "Well, I don't think everyone felt that way." Trump cut in, not unkindly, but firmly. "Actually, Jimmy, they did. Even you liked me back then. I remember you had a lot of fun with me on this show." The audience let out a mix of laughter and murmurs. Fallon's smile was still there, but his tone changed, slightly more cautious, like a comedian stepping into unfamiliar terrain. The tense middle. From there, the conversation walked a fine line. Fallon asked about policy. Trump redirected to accomplishments. Fallon tried a game segment to break the tension, but Trump steered it back to politics, making pointed remarks about the current administration. The crowd's reactions were split. Some clapped, others stayed silent. Cameras caught Fallon glancing briefly at his cue cards, then back at Trump, as if weighing whether to push further or pivot away. Behind the scenes, producers in the control room were whispering through headsets. Fallon had freedom on air, but he also had an audience to keep, sponsors to please, and a reputation for keeping interviews fun. Trump, however, thrived in unscripted moments. The more unpredictable, the better. The unexpected turn. About halfway through, Fallon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Donald, do you ever regret anything? A decision, a tweet, a moment?" Trump's smile faltered, just for a second. "Jimmy, I think about things, sure. But regret? Not really. You can't win if you're always looking back." Fallon pressed gently. "Even the times you got, well, a little heated." Trump chuckled low, shaking his head. "Jimmy, you've gotten heated too. Remember that time you smashed a pie in my face? Didn't hold it against you." The audience laughed again, the tension softening, but the shift had been felt. For the rest of the segment, the two moved between humor and pointed commentary, each aware of the fine balance they were keeping. The closing moments. As the interview wrapped up, Fallon thanked Trump for coming. "It's always interesting having you here. Never a dull moment." Trump leaned toward him with a grin. "That's because I don't do dull, Jimmy. People like excitement. That's why they watch you." and that's why they watch me. The applause came again, louder this time, but still with that undercurrent. As the cameras cut to commercial, Fallon and Trump exchanged a few words off mic. Fallon laughed, but his eyes gave away something else. Maybe relief, maybe exhaustion. When the show aired that night, viewers saw the jokes, the smiles, the handshake at the end. But those in the studio knew they'd witnessed something different, a late-night conversation that wasn't just entertainment. It was a careful dance between two men who knew exactly how much the other could shape the room. And maybe that's why the buzz in the air never really faded. The moment everything changed. Halfway through the interview, the easy laughter of the first few minutes had already started to cool. Fallon, sensing the energy in the room, shifted in his seat and adjusted his cue cards. He had a choice: stay in safe, comedic waters or wade into something more challenging. He chose the latter. The jokes faded, and Fallon leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his desk. His tone was still friendly, but there was a new weight in it. "Mr. Trump," he began, "a lot of people feel your comments lately have gone too far. Do you think maybe you're crossing a line?" The crowd hushed. No polite chuckles, no restless shuffling, just silence. Trump's smile remained, but it was thinner now, tighter at the edges. He straightened in his chair, meeting Fallon's eyes without blinking. "Jimmy," he said, his voice measured, "the media twists everything I say. Always has. I'm not here to be lectured. I came to talk about the real issues, not the fake ones." The words hung in the air like a dropped glass just before it shatters. Fallon gave a small laugh, trying to slide them back into friendlier territory. "Well, I think our viewers are just curious." But Trump wasn't moving with the current. He cut in, sharper this time. No. You don't get to hide behind a joke when you're throwing punches," he said, his voice rising enough for the back row to feel the vibration. The audience gasped audibly. The sound was quick but heavy, like a single clap in a quiet church. This wasn't the playful late-night sparring they were used to. This was turning into a showdown. A room divided. In the control room, producers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Some were already gesturing to camera operators to zoom in tighter. This was the kind of unscripted moment that could go viral by morning. Back on stage, Fallon's smile was still there, but it had become more of a mask. He wasn't a stranger to tension, but this was different. Trump wasn't playing the celebrity guest anymore. He was in campaign mode, sharp, defensive, unfiltered. "Mr. President," Fallon began. "Donald," Trump interrupted quickly. "Or Mr. Trump, not Mr. President. You're trying to put me in a box." Fallon paused for a split second, then leaned back in his chair, almost as if giving Trump more space. Or more rope. "I'm just saying," Fallon continued, "there's a line between strong opinions and dangerous language. Do you see that line?" Trump leaned forward now, elbows on his knees. His voice dropped slightly, but the intensity only sharpened. "The only danger, Jimmy, is when people can't speak freely. And that's exactly what's happening. They want to shut me up. They want to shut a lot of people up. And you, even you, are part of that media machine." The crowd reacted, not as one, but in a ripple. Some clapped in agreement. Others stayed stiff, their faces lit by the warm studio lights, but frozen with discomfort. Fallon held his ground. Fallon could have steered the conversation back to golf or funny celebrity impressions. That was his comfort zone. But something in him, maybe a sense of responsibility, maybe curiosity, kept him there in the storm. "Donald," Fallon said, his voice calm but resolute, "I'm not trying to shut you up. I'm just asking if maybe the way you say things matters as much as what you say." Trump tilted his head, studying Fallon like a chess opponent considering his next move. Then he shook his head slowly. "People are tired of polite lies, Jimmy. They want the truth, even if it's not wrapped in a nice little bow." The audience was caught in the middle, a strange mix of applause and uneasy silence. You could feel the push and pull in the air, as if the crowd couldn't decide whether they were at a comedy show or a political rally. The break before the break. Fallon glanced toward the camera, then back at Trump. "Well," he said lightly, "we're definitely not wrapping anything in bows tonight." Trump smirked. "Exactly. And that's why your ratings just went up." The tension broke slightly with a ripple of laughter, but it didn't fully dissipate. Fallon quickly announced they'd be right back after the break, and the band jumped in with upbeat music, filling the studio with brass and drums. Off-camera sparks. As the cameras cut away, Fallon leaned in just enough for Trump to hear him over the music. "You know that's going to be all over the news tomorrow, right?" Trump grinned. "Good. Let them talk." Fallon laughed, but it was a short, knowing laugh, the kind that says this just became bigger than the show. When they came back from commercial, the mood was lighter, but the electricity from that exchange lingered. The audience clapped along, but you could tell they were still replaying those few charged minutes in their heads. By the time the interview ended, everyone in that studio, from the cameraman to the people in the back row, knew they had witnessed something rare for late-night television. Not just banter, but a clash of personalities, each unwilling to fully give ground. And for better or worse, they knew the headlines were already writing themselves. The breaking point. What followed wasn't just an interview. It was several minutes of live television that felt more like a courtroom cross-examination. Fallon pushed for answers. Trump pushed back harder. "Mr. Trump, people want to know," Fallon began, his voice measured, leaning forward in the familiar, host engaging the guest pose. "Jimmy, you're doing what every other host does." Trump cut in, his tone sharper now. "You're trying to make me the bad guy because it gets you ratings." The audience reacted with a low ripple of murmurs, the kind of sound that means something just shifted. The warm, easy laughter from earlier was gone. This wasn't the smiling banter late-night viewers were used to. This was bare-knuckle verbal sparring. The tension sets in. Fallon, known for smoothing over awkward moments with a joke or a quick subject change, didn't reach for that escape hatch. Instead, he held his ground, his smile faint but his eyes steady. "It's not about ratings," he said evenly. "It's about honesty." Trump leaned back in his gray armchair, his movements deliberate. He crossed one leg over the other, rested an arm on the armrest, and stared straight at Fallon. "Honesty," he repeated, his voice dripping with emphasis. "Let me tell you about honesty." And then, like someone flicking a switch, he launched into a fiery defense of himself. His voice rose. His hands moved in wide arcs, slicing the air for emphasis. At one point, he pointed directly at the audience. At another, he gestured toward the cameras, almost as if speaking directly to viewers at home rather than to Fallon. "The media has been dishonest about me from day one," Trump said. "They twist my words, they cut my sentences in half. They take a joke and turn it into an insult. And they've been doing it for years. You know it. I know it. Everybody knows it." The room splits. The audience was no longer one unified crowd. A cluster of people in the middle rows started clapping, sharp, deliberate applause, as if to punctuate his points. But others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting between Trump and Fallon, unsure whether to engage or stay silent. The band in the corner, led by the Roots, kept still. No one was playing a note, and in that silence, every word carried extra weight. Fallon sat upright now, no longer leaning forward. He let Trump finish his sentence, then responded, his voice calm but firm. "I think," Fallon said slowly, "that being honest also means being responsible for how your words land. Whether you intend them a certain way or not, they have an impact." Trump shook his head. "That's your interpretation, Jimmy. You want me to speak the way you think is safe. But safe doesn't fix the problems we have." The verbal battle. For the next few minutes, it went back and forth. Fallon trying to frame questions in a way that demanded direct answers, Trump steering them into counterattacks on fake news, media bias, and political opponents. At one point, Fallon tried to pivot. "But this isn't just about politics. It's about people. Real people who..." Trump jumped in. "And those people are smarter than you think. They see through the lies. They see through the spin. And they're tired of shows like this pretending to be fair when they're not." That landed like a jab. The crowd let out another audible reaction, some clapping, some gasping. Fallon's eyes flicked briefly toward the camera, then back to Trump. "I'm not pretending to be fair," Fallon said, a small edge creeping into his tone. "I'm asking questions that matter." Trump smirked. "You think they matter. I think they're a distraction from the real issues." The unscripted moment. In the control room, producers were frantically gesturing to each other. The segment had already run long. Someone spoke into Fallon's earpiece, likely telling him they needed to wrap it up, but he didn't seem to hear, or maybe he didn't want to. The energy in the room had transformed completely. It wasn't a comedy show anymore. It wasn't even just an interview. It was a duel, two public figures, live on air, refusing to give the other the last word. The closing exchange. Finally, Fallon leaned back, nodding slightly. "Well," he said with a faint grin, "you've definitely given people something to talk about tonight." Trump leaned forward again, pointing toward Fallon with a half-smile. "That's because I tell the truth, Jimmy. And sometimes, the truth makes people uncomfortable." The audience erupted, not in unanimous applause, but a messy mix of cheers, claps, and low murmurs. The divide in the room was impossible to miss. Fallon straightened his stack of cue cards. "All right," he said, "we'll be right back after the break." The Roots launched into an upbeat riff, almost too upbeat for the mood that had just unfolded, and the cameras cut to commercial. As soon as the red recording light went off, Fallon leaned toward Trump and said something too quiet for the microphones to catch. Trump nodded once, then sat back, his expression calm, almost pleased. Everyone in that studio, from the camera operators to the people in the balcony, knew they had just seen something rare, a late-night conversation that stopped being entertainment and became something raw, real, and deeply polarizing. And for better or worse, they knew it wouldn't stay in the studio. By morning, it would be everywhere. The walk-off. Then came the breaking point. The interview had been teetering on the edge for several minutes. Trump pushing back harder with every question, Fallon trying to steady the mood and steer them back to safer ground. The crowd was restless, leaning forward in their seats like they were watching the final round of a prize fight. Fallon, perhaps sensing the tension had reached its limit, decided to make one last attempt to lighten the mood. "So," he said, forcing a small grin, "why don't we wrap this up with something fun? Maybe a game? Celebrity impressions? You can do your best, Jimmy Fallon." But Trump didn't even smile. He leaned forward, both hands gripping the arms of his chair, and spoke into the mic with a clarity that cut through the entire studio. "You know what, Jimmy? I don't need to sit here and be part of your little game." The silence. It was like someone had hit the mute button on the audience. Every whisper, every shuffle of foot gone. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. Fallon's eyebrows shot up, the smile sliding from his face. "Wait," Fallon said, blinking at him. "Are you serious?" Trump pushed back his chair with a sharp scrape against the stage floor. The sound echoed in the stillness. He stood, straightened his jacket with a brisk tug, and looked straight at the audience, scanning the room as if taking their measure. "I've got better things to do," he said, his voice loud, clear, and unwavering. "Then play along when you're not being fair. Good night, everybody." The exit. Without another word, Trump turned toward the edge of the stage. The overhead lights caught the gold sheen of his hair as he strode past the band, past the camera operators, and toward the darkened backstage curtain. Fallon remained seated behind his desk, one hand resting on his cue cards, the other gripping his coffee mug like he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. His mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out. The audience didn't know how to react. A few clapped, almost instinctively, but the sound was scattered and hesitant. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting between the now empty guest chair and Fallon's stunned expression. A couple of voices shouted, "Come back," from the back rows, while one or two boos floated in from somewhere on the right side of the room. It was a jumble of responses, none of them unified, just raw, unfiltered reaction to a moment no one had expected. The cut to commercial. In the control room, the director's voice snapped through headsets. "Cut! Cut! Go to break now!" On stage, Fallon's desk light dimmed slightly as the band, the Roots, began playing a fast, upbeat riff, the kind of music usually reserved for smooth transitions, but here it felt almost jarring. The cameras panned quickly away from the empty chair, landing on Fallon's neutral expression before fading out. A bright red commercial light flashed above the studio audience, but no one was thinking about ads. They were buzzing, whispering to each other in low, urgent tones. Some were grinning in disbelief, others shaking their heads. The mood was electric, charged with that strange mixture of shock and curiosity that only happens when something completely unscripted breaks through the polish of live television. Off-camera fallout. As soon as the cameras were off, Fallon exhaled, leaning back in his chair. One of the producers rushed to his side, whispering quickly in his ear. Fallon nodded, rubbing his forehead with one hand. Backstage, Trump moved briskly through the narrow hallway, jacket still perfectly in place. A production assistant, clearly flustered, trailed after him, saying, "Mr. Trump, we still had." Trump cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Tell Jimmy I said good luck. He's going to need it." He didn't stop walking until he reached the black SUV waiting outside the stage door. The audience release. Back in the studio, the commercial break gave the crowd a chance to breathe, but it didn't calm them. Some are already pulling out their phones, texting friends, or recording whispered recaps of what they'd just seen. Others debated whether Trump's walk-off was justified or pure theatrics. Fallon sat quietly for most of the break, occasionally sipping from his mug, his eyes focused somewhere far beyond the audience. When the floor manager finally counted them back in, and we're live in 3, 2, Fallon put his host smile back on, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Well," he said, looking into the camera, "that was something. We'll be right back with more tonight's show after this." The audience clapped, louder this time, as if trying to reset the mood. But underneath, that buzz lingered. Everyone in the room knew they had just witnessed a rare, unscripted moment on live television. And by the time they left the studio that night, they knew one more thing. By morning, this would be all over the internet. Clips would go viral. Headlines would spin in every direction. And the walk-off would live on, replayed, dissected, and argued over, long after the lights in NBC Studio 6B went dark. The aftershock. Minutes after the incident, while the audience was still filing out of NBC Studio 6B, the internet had already seized on what had just happened. Clips of Trump's walk-off hit social media before the credits even rolled. Someone from the audience had uploaded a shaky, phone-recorded video from the balcony. The audio grainy, the angle off-center, but the drama crystal clear. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok lit up almost instantly. Within 20 minutes, hashtag Trump walks off and hashtag Fallon versus Trump were trending in the U.S., and an hour later, they were trending globally. Half of the internet erupted with cheers for Trump, hailing him as someone who stood his ground against what they saw as a biased interview. Memes flooded in, Trump edited into action movie walk-offs, soundtracked by rock anthems, with captions like, "When you know you're winning the argument." The other half of the internet applauded Fallon, praising him for finally asking tough questions instead of sticking to his usual lighthearted games. Clips circulated of the moment Fallon said, "It's not about ratings. It's about honesty," with hashtags like hashtag Fallon Unfiltered and hashtag About Time. Even people who hadn't watched the show in years suddenly had an opinion. The morning headlines. By sunrise, the next day's news cycle had been completely rewritten. Morning shows on every major network led with the footage. The clip played in slow motion, over and over, Trump standing, Fallon looking stunned, the audience caught in that mix of shock and confusion. Cable news ran it on loop, each channel spinning the moment to fit its narrative. Some called it a masterclass in standing up to media bias. Others called it proof Trump can't handle tough questions. Headlines blared across news websites and newspapers. Trump versus Fallon. The night late-night TV turned into a political arena. Walk-off shocker. Unscripted moment rocks The Tonight Show. When comedy meets confrontation, Fallon holds his ground. Pundits and late-night competitors weighed in. Stephen Colbert joked in his monologue, "I've had guests storm off before, but usually it's just because I ran out of snacks." Trevor Noah, on The Daily Show, quipped, "If I left every time someone asked me a tough question, I'd never finish dinner." NBC's official word. By late morning, NBC released a short, carefully worded statement. "We respect all of our guests and appreciate their perspectives. We hope to welcome Mr. Trump back to The Tonight Show in the future." It was polite, professional, and notably vague. Insiders later claimed the network brass had mixed feelings. On one hand, the viral attention was a ratings goldmine. On the other, the unpredictability of such moments made advertisers nervous. Fallon's response. That evening, Fallon addressed it on his next show. Dressed in his usual dark suit and striped tie, he sat at his desk and grinned as the crowd cheered. Well, he began, letting the laughter swell. That wasn't on the cue cards. The audience roared. Fallon then added, Look, sometimes things don't go the way you expect, especially in live TV. But hey, at least it wasn't another game of charades. It was a clever way to acknowledge the elephant in the room without reigniting the firestorm. Trump's counterpunch. Trump, true to form, didn't wait long to respond. On his social media platform, he posted, I left because it wasn't worth the time. Another setup by the media. Same old tricks. Not playing their game. He paired the message with a clip of his walk-off, captioned simply, Never waste time on fake news. Supporters flooded the comments with praise. Detractors mocked the post with edited videos of him walking off in different absurd scenarios, from kids' birthday parties to game shows. A moment that wouldn't die. By the end of the week, the incident had been dissected from every possible angle. Media analysts debated whether it was calculated theater on Trump's part or a genuine loss of patience. Political commentators argued over whether Fallon had crossed a line or whether he'd finally stepped up as a serious interviewer. Meanwhile, clips of the moment continued to rack up millions of views across platforms. Reaction videos popped up on YouTube, some frame by frame, analyzing Trump's body language, others breaking down Fallon's facial expressions in those final moments. Even late-night history buffs chimed in, comparing it to other infamous TV walk-offs, like the time Madonna dropped an F-bomb on Letterman, or when Crispin Glover nearly kicked David Letterman in the head. The legacy of a walk-off. Weeks later, the buzz had faded, but the clip had cemented itself as part of modern late-night lore. It became shorthand for unexpected, unscripted moments, the kind you can't script, rehearse, or undo. What was supposed to be another episode of The Tonight Show had turned into something else entirely. A political flashpoint, a pop culture event, and a reminder that live television is still capable of delivering moments that stop people in their tracks. And maybe that's why it's stuck in people's minds. It wasn't polished. It wasn't planned. It was messy, raw, and real. For better or worse, one thing was certain. No one who saw that episode would ever forget it. What was supposed to be a late-night laugh turned into a late-night legend, proving that sometimes the most unforgettable TV moments don't just happen, they explode right in front of us. And that's the story of the night late-night TV turned into a political battlefield. Moments like this remind us that in live television, anything can happen, and sometimes it does. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable true stories, and let me know in the comments.